Now we're going to take a moment to solve absolute value inequalities. So what does that look like? It's like this. You've got the variable inside absolute value, and you have an inequality symbol here. So let's solve absolute value of x is less than or equal to 3. Now, a lot of people have tried to maybe memorize methods in the past that people eventually forget. I'd like to try something that's much more down to earth and just really answer what an inequality should always answer is just what numbers can be x. So let's just try plugging in values of x to see what works, right? So the question we're asking is which numbers, after applying absolute value, are less than or equal to 3. So could x be 0? Sure. Right? You plug in x is 0. You have absolute value of 0 on the left side, which simplifies to 0, and that would be less than or equal to 3. Okay, could x be 1? Yeah. Could x be 2? Yes. Could x be 3? Yeah. Now, what if you plug in x equals 4? Then the left side is absolute value of 4, which simplifies to 4. 4 less than or equal to 3? That's not true, so we'll say no. Similarly, x equals 5? That doesn't work either. Okay, but we started at 0, right? So let's now move along the left of the number line and check what happens with x equals negative 1. That's fine. Okay, x equals negative 2 is fine. X equals negative 3. Well, if you plug in negative 3 for x, you'll have a negative 3 inside the absolute value, right in here. Then you'd have to absolute value, and you get the number positive 3, which is still less than or equal to 3. So yeah, that works. X equals negative 4 doesn't work. X equals negative 5 doesn't work. Okay, by the way, x equals 2.9 works, x equals 3.1 doesn't work. But here, just by testing values of x, just by plugging in values of x, we see what's working and what's not working, and this would be a picture that summarizes all the values of x that work. We include negative 3, we include positive 3, we include all the numbers between. So, now that we have this picture based on experimenting, just based on plugging in values of x, what we now do is we can describe this in interval notation, bracket, negative 3, comma 3, bracket. And then we can describe this in algebraic notation as well. So all of these work. I think most people's preference, to be honest, instead of writing negative 3 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 3 as a double inequality, I think most people's preference will either be to split it out like this, when you split it, to use the word and then the thing is, I think a lot of people like to have the variable written on the left side. So we just have to make sure that here, see the alligators eating the x, we would still do this here. So x greater than or equal to negative 3, and x is less than or equal to 3. So simultaneously, both of these things have to happen. We don't just want the values of x to be greater than or equal to negative 3. They also, that's why the word and is here, they also need to be less than or equal to 3. I've seen things like this that people try to write down, which doesn't work. So just because there's an absolute value at the top, people sometimes try to write absolute value of x greater than or equal to negative 3 and absolute value of x less than or equal to 3. But we need to provide an answer about x. Let's try another one. Absolute value of x greater than or equal to 5. Okay, so again, we just want to first test what numbers could we plug in for x? Right, so what numbers, after you apply absolute value, are going to be greater than or equal to 5? Could x be 0? No, that's not going to work. x1? No. X equals 2. Let's skip along. X equals 5? That works. X equals 6? That works as well. And we can see from this pattern already that 7, x equals 7 works, x equals 8 works, and so on and so forth. X equals negative 1 is not going to work. X equals negative 5? Yeah, that works. X equals negative 6? Yeah, that works. And so based on just doing a little spot check, just by plugging in values of x, notice I said values of x, not values of absolute value of x. You pick a value for x, and then you absolute value it, and that's what the left side has simplified to. And then seeing if what you get from the result of absolute valuing, is that greater than or equal to 5, based on whether it is or not, that determines what we've shaded here. So we've got negative 5 and all the numbers to the left. We also have positive 5 and all the numbers to the right. Here it is in interval notation. And then we can write this out as double inequality. We do need the word or. Remember that the union symbol will convert to the word or here. Common mistake is to write something like this, is to have a final answer that still has absolute values in it. But that hasn't processed the absolute values at all if you do anything like this, right? So the answer needs to talk about x, not about absolute value of x. So your final answer has to answer the question about what x can be. And if your final answer just is stuck with absolute values, all you've done is basically created a problem much like the one you started with. Okay, Now, this is maybe the point to say try not to just memorize things. I think sometimes people try to say, oh, if I have these absolute value inequalities, I see a less than symbol, then I'm going to first flip the symbol and then unflip the symbol and I'll stick a minus sign and then, a greater than sign and a less than sign. And one of these should be and one of these should be or. In fact, there's even a typo here. Okay, I'll just maybe mention right now that this word right there should be or, so I apologize about that. But trying to just memorize these things is going to cause problems because if people try to memorize with this less than or equal to here, then even when this is flipped around, it does become so. There's just the real issue with just trying to memorize. And again, apologies that this word here should be or is there's too much meaningless stuff to remember. It's actually much more natural to go through this experiment by plugging in values for x. Start from 0 and see what values of x work and what values of x don't work. Draw that on a number line. That just makes this a much, much nicer process. Okay, it's much more down to earth, to be really honest, to just plug in values of x and not absolute value of x. Yeah, you pick a value of x and then you have to absolute value it, but you've got to pick a value of x. Okay, this is much more down to earth. And here's the other thing, really, it helps create a more thorough understanding of what a solution to an inequality is. And that's a really good thing.